Live from Liverpool, the Dark Paranormal, Dark Bites.
Hello everyone, and welcome to, as promised, our bonus episode the week before our debut of Season 17. And on this bonus episode, we'll be giving you one of our Patreon's Dark Bites episodes. These are the shows that our Patreons receive each and every week of the year without fail, even on the downtime between seasons. And of course contain a mixture of the shorter experiences that we receive as a show. And of course, aside from these Dark Bites episodes, our Patreons will receive next week's debut episode of Season 17 both early and ad-free. So before we give you our taster episode for Dark Bites, we of course said we would continue to complete the names of our newest Patreons for Season 16. And don't forget, if you'd like to join our community of like-minded paranormal enthusiasts, just head over to patreon.com/The Dark Paranormal. And so, before we head into this bonus episode of Dark Bites, let's say a big thank you to our newest team members. Lou, Diane Nixon, Kimura Gray, Yesenia Herrera, Sarah Rizicki, James Calcutt, Chris Austin, Mr. Ting, Dustin Lindsay, Sam Reese, Michelle Banahan, Lindsay, McKenna Rusted, Liliana, Fellow Scouser, Lewis Berry, D. Carmichael, Rachel Pace Davies, Kira Froese, Catherine Bird, Alice Jarcy, Rachel B, Corey, Lucas Ginsberg, Desidrata, Andrew Tucker, Mike Gorgeous Pants, Eric, Damien Tyres, Natalie McMillan, Roxanne Brioni, Amanda Hawksby, Michelle Large, Tori Gilliam, Hadam Almasrui, Sarah Rip, Keith Dale, Brianna Case, Mandy, Guerzo, Rebecca Gray, Michael Bennett, Johanna Lewin, John Hartley, Aaron Gonzalez, Jacqueline Lloyd, Kia Char, Meredith, Ian Hennessy, and GN. Thank you so much for the support, guys. Genuinely, you are the reason we're allowed to go into Season 17 next week. So, right now, let's go into this bonus episode of our Patreon-only content, Dark Bites. Hello Patreons, and welcome back to your first mid-season Dark Bites. If you're new to the show, and I can see lots of you are, what we do here on Dark Bites is take a look at some of the stories which were simply not long enough to feature as a main episode of the Dark Paranormal. However, as we always say on Dark Bites, the length of your paranormal experience should not be indicative of how truthful nor how terrifying that experience was. I personally say most weeks that the stories that we hear on this show, on Dark Bites, are the ones that drill themselves into my brain throughout my working week. And I can tell from the comments we receive that that's also the case for our Patreons. This week, one of our Patreons, Courtney, asked a question which I think would be good to address on the show. In a nutshell, she asked if any of the submissions received for Dark Bites were in any way edited or fluffed up to make them more palatable by me. Now, the truth is, for the Dark Paranormal show, I do edit some of the stories. I never add any information, but I may change the odd word, I may add a pause if I think it's needed for effect, and obviously I will also add sound effects, maybe some atmospheric music, or whatever's needed for that person's personal paranormal experience to convey the level of terror they felt. The key difference here on Dark Bites is the experiences you hear have not had anything done to them at all. The only one thing I will do is if a sentence literally doesn't make sense, I will amend it so that it does. And that's as far as we go. So the experiences that you hear here on Dark Bites are quite literally straight from the horse's mouth. And I do that for two reasons, really. On the Dark Paranormal, I need to maintain a consistent audio approach. And therefore, quite a lot of effort goes into the balancing, the editing, to make sure that you, as the listener, hear something you're familiar with. However, what we do here on Dark Bites is we want to try and deliver the experiences exactly how they were received. Because although it's my job to present these experiences in as professional way as possible, sometimes the most terrifying tales you'll hear are best read by myself verbatim by the person who sent them in. especially on these shorter experiences. On a larger 30-minute plus experience, it becomes more about the tangent of the tale. On a shorter experience, the nuances are everything. And for worse or for better, it's best that I leave that length of experience alone. And as a host, it's fascinating the mails that I receive off the back of these unedited, untouched listener submissions. For example, in the last 2 weeks, I've received 2 particular emails, one saying, "I didn't believe a word of that story that was told," another saying that story described exactly what happened to me as a child. And they were both in relation to the same experience. I think there can be a misconception when I ask people to leave their disbelief at the door. Everyone should have an open mind in relation to the paranormal. But no one on this show in particular is asking you to believe everything you hear. That's down to you. Paranormal experiences are in many ways like music. It's subjective. It's what you take from that tale. But one thing we will never have in this community is ridicule of somebody's experience, because none of us truly know. This is and always will be a safe space for anyone to describe their paranormal experience. And with all that said, let's jump right in to today's episode of Dark Bites. And our first email comes in from Annabelle, and they write, "Hello, Kev. My name is Annabelle, and I'm a huge fan of your show. I'm also a Patreon. I have a few experiences with the paranormal as well. In fact, I've always felt like there was an otherworldly presence that's been a part of my life for as long as I can remember. But it seems every time I listen to your show, this presence seems to make itself known. And sometimes it feels like this presence is to protect me. But other times, I feel it isn't as friendly. I even think that there may be more than a presence around me, following me. And when I listen to your show, they seem to make their presence unavoidable. Things seem to move around, even though I didn't touch them. And sometimes I hear my name when I'm completely home alone. Sometimes it feels like I'm being protected, or I'm being toyed with. Anyways, all my experiences have been small and have been insignificant. But there was this one night where I seemed to experience a very real and very scary situation. I recall once asking my parents if they've ever had any experiences with ghosts. My mum once said that when she visited an elder family member of hers, she would stay in this old house, and she and her family would leave the house for the day. Not one person left in the house. And when they would come back, things would be moved around, and anything that we had used and was scattered about had been returned to their proper place. My father has always been both a skeptic and a believer in the supernatural. He's a devoted Christian, and he believes in heaven and hell. I even think one time my father messed with a Ouija board. And my father has had supernatural experiences as well. So whatever lies dormant with my dad could be what I felt. I myself struggle with the supernatural, because whilst I'm a believer, it also terrifies me. So it's easier if I think it doesn't exist. I'd like to think I'm sensitive to these things, but the truth is I don't actually know. When I meet someone, I can't tell if I'm reading their aura or relying on instinct. But I can tell if someone is bad news or not within a few seconds of interacting with them, and sometimes even just by looking at them. Throughout my life, I've always had dreams that have come to fruition, one even involving myself, and I always seem to sense when something goes wrong, or if someone is hurt that I'm close to. I am not by any means psychic, but I do seem to have a sixth sense that comes and goes. I have a few tales to share, but I need to gather my thoughts and my wits first. Because, like I said, listening to your show seems to either make me more sensitive to whatever otherworldly presences are around me, or it makes it easier for those presences to cross over between the veil. From Annabelle. Well, first and foremost, Annabelle, as always, a huge thank you for getting in touch. Secondly, please do write down and send in your experiences. And thirdly, you hit on something we've touched on before with this show. Now, here's the interesting thing. At no point have I ever said that this show, nor the Dark Paranormal, are some kind of portal or some kind of divination device to reach the other side. It would seem like such a ridiculous statement for me to make or claim. What I have done is read out what I've received from other people, from listeners. And there has been a handful of people who've got in touch to say that whilst listening to the show, they've experienced something paranormal. So could there be a link? I don't know. None of us know. I mentioned this once on the Dark Paranormal and received an email from a listener who rather angrily said they were going to never listen again because although they were interested in ghost stories, etc., they didn't want to take part in my divination exercise. In no way am I trying to conduct a divination exercise. But it would be exceptionally remiss of me to not repeat an email I've received about somebody experiencing something paranormal whilst listening to the show, especially to a group of listeners who are educated in the topic and want to know more about what can and can't take place. At no point have I said listening to this show may open a doorway. What I have said, and I stand by it to this day, is when you look into the darkness, as the old quote goes, don't be surprised when it looks back. And yes, this show may put you in the mindset of that dark place, and therefore something may look back. But that's not down to the show. I do strongly believe in the untapped power of the mind, especially in relation to the spiritual world. Therefore, it's no surprise when I receive a story that begins with, we were doing the Ouija board and then X, or we were telling ghost stories and then X. I do believe there is some sort of state of mind that you can fall into, which can make you more susceptible to the other side. My very simple theory on this is you have two levels in your brain. One, what you believe can happen, and one, what you know can happen. Now, 99% of the time of your day, they are level. You believe you can open a door, your hand reaches out and you physically open the door, because you know you can open a door. And those two levels need to meet for the action to take place. But when we discuss the paranormal, what you believe can happen might be on 80% in regards to the paranormal, but what you know can happen may be around 20. But the more you listen to ghost stories, the more you do Ouija boards, the more you interact with the paranormal, what you know can happen and what you believe can happen start to become close. And when they eventually click, that may be when something flies off your shelf, or you feel that presence behind you. But if I'm being totally honest, I honestly don't know. Podcasting is in its infancy. This sort of interaction between host, listener, and all of the electronic equipment involved is in its infancy. So would I rule out that listening to something may trigger something? Absolutely not. That's how hypnotism works. And if we travel down the religious route, I'm a Catholic, for example, that's how confession works. You communicate, you talk to someone about your sins, and they're allegedly forgiven by a higher power. And basically, what I'm really going about the houses in saying is I want no one to be concerned when listening to this show or the Dark Paranormal. I want you to be scared. That is the point of this show. I want to remind everyone that you should be scared of the paranormal. Because firstly, if you believe, there is something to be afraid of. And both this and the dark paranormal, I simply want to act as a reminder of that fact. Anyway, I'll step down from my soapbox now and we'll continue with our next email for Dark Bites. Hi Kevin, I'd like to remain anonymous please. Just due to some of the events that are mentioned. There should probably be a trigger warning too, just about some of the abuse that is mentioned. I'm a newer listener to the show, having only gone through the first couple of seasons, but I feel I'd like to have at least one of my stories out there. I have a lot of stories, and I'm definitely one who believes in the paranormal, only because of my experiences surrounding events in my life. So when I'm going through in my mind all of the experiences I've had, this one jumps out. And I should state I'm almost in my 30s, but I truly believe that this story is undoubtedly one that I've only discussed with those who've stepped into that home. So let's get into it. Many years ago, my mum got married to her second husband. At the time, I was 11. I have 4 younger sisters who were all excited to welcome him into our family. I remember a few months before, my mum coming downstairs and asking me if it would be a good idea or something like that if he would become part of the family. And I can tell you, as I sit here writing, I regret saying yes. This isn't your typical story, and I promise as much as I want to say my new stepdad was the monster, if anything, he brought something into our happy little home with him when he came.
Today's show is sponsored by Acorns. Now, one of the things which I always got wrong is I believed that investment was for other people. The sort of people who have a finance degree and use phrases like buy low, sell high. And I don't have a finance degree and I don't use phrases like that. And I also thought that you needed a lot of money to start investing, but that's not the case. Acorns makes it easy to start automatically saving and investing for you, for your kids, for your retirement. You don't need a lot of money or expertise to invest with Acorns. In fact, you can get started with just your spare change. Acorns recommends an expert-built portfolio that fits you and your money goals, then automatically invests your money for you. And now Acorns is putting their money into your future. Open an Acorns Later IRA and get up to a 3% match on new contributions. That's extra money for your retirement. I'm 45 and not thinking about retirement, but I really should be, and that's why I'm glad places like Acorns exist, because it's a genuine relief to know there are a team of experts waiting to help guide you through that formerly scary world of investment. Head to acorns.com/dark paranormal or download the Acorns app to start saving and investing for your future today. Paid non-client endorsement. Compensation provides incentive to positively promote Acorns. Investment involves risk. Acorn Advisors LLC, an SEC registered investment advisor. View important disclosures at acorns.com/dark paranormal. Today's show is brought to you by Grundy's MD MCT Wellness. And what MCTs, I hear you say? Well, an MCT is a special kind of compound that instead of turning into fat when you consume it, it turns into ketones, which is a chemical that breaks down excess fat in your body. And if people are dieting now more than ever before, then why are nearly 1 in 3 American adults overweight? Well, Dr. Grundy, who's helped thousands lose weight and feel younger and healthier than ever, says most people are not getting enough fat-burning MCTs from their food. So, by getting more MCTs in your diet, you essentially flip a switch, one that puts your body in caloric bypass mode, which can flush out the excess fat and calories. And he's created an easy way for you to activate that caloric bypass at home. And it's called MCT Wellness. This powerful blend of fat-flushing MCT powders and antioxidant-rich polyphenols is specifically designed to help you unlock your body's fat-burning, energy-producing potential. All you do is add a scoop to water and enjoy it, and what's more, it tastes incredible. So you get to enjoy a delicious drink and then watch as you start to feel slimmer and more energized. So if you want to experience a quick, easy and effective way to melt pounds fast, go to grundymd.com/dark paranormal and order right now to get up to 53% off your regular priced order, plus a 90-day money-back guarantee. So once more, that's grundymd.com/dark paranormal.
I don't know how many people out there know what it's like to have a step-parent, but being the oldest and living with my single mother for 9 years, in brackets, my mum was married for 2 years prior, my stepdad and I never really got along. We fought a lot, and it didn't help he came into our life as I was hitting puberty. We fought all the time. He was an alcoholic, and as time went on, he became mentally and emotionally abusive. Now, here's where the paranormal really starts to come around. A year into their marriage, my mum gave birth to my first brother, and it was hard. My stepdad was against my mum feeding the baby at night, despite him having a cleft palate. So feeding was already hard for him to start. The abuse in the house became constant, and my mum didn't seem aware of how bad the abuse was. My sisters and I slept in the basement. There were 3 rooms I didn't share, and the other 4 were divided into partners. It was an interesting setup, and let me tell you, the more violent the abuse got, the darker the basement seemed. Our house was a bi-level split, 5 bedrooms and an office. Once my brother was born, my one sister was sent downstairs to sleep with one of my other siblings. The basement was not a safe space. There was something there, and even now, years later, that house seems to be surrounded by, well, whatever that darkness was. It seemed to consume the entire house. I swear to you, there was something more living in the house. And looking back as someone who is now sensitive to the paranormal, I still have no idea what it was. At night, it was the worst. At the end of the hallway was the light switch, and my sisters and I would literally play rock, paper, scissors to see who would go and turn it off. As the darkness grew in the house, we would race downstairs to be the first one to bed, because if you were the last one, you would have to turn off the switch and run to your room. It sounds crazy, and I feel ridiculous thinking that something else resided in our basement. I remember later sitting down with my sisters, and we brought up this thing. It started out normal. You fear the basement running up the stairs because you had younger siblings behind you, giggling and thundering. It was only one time I was home alone. I was probably around 16. My mum was probably out shopping with my siblings, or I was in trouble for whatever reason. But it was a sunny day out, and I was going downstairs to my room. There was something about that particular time going downstairs. It felt like something was staring up at me. And you know how in movies the hall seems to get longer? Well, as I looked down the stairs, this particular time, it seemed to be longer than the normal 7 steps. Yes, I'm the one who counts my steps, and there were a total of 14 in the house. 16 depending on how many you took on the landing. Anyways, taking precautions, I slowly walked down the stairs. My heart was beating in my ears, and I know for a fact I'm home alone. Once down the stairs, I looked both ways, looking left down the hall towards the bedrooms. Thinking about it and writing this, I can still subconsciously feel the darkness boring holes into the back of my head. The fear of looking to my right, which was where the TV/living room was, and where I believed the thing lived. You can call it whatever you want, but I promise you that me and my sisters called it the darkness. As I turned to look into the living room, just to make sure I was definitely home alone, nothing was in the living room. So I went to walk down to my room, and the feeling came back. So I ran. I ran into my room and I slammed the door behind me. This isn't the only time this happened. As the chaos in the house grew, so did this darkness. It became so bad that my sisters and I would never go to the basement alone, and we'd never go in after dark. I've gone back to the house once or twice, more because my brother is only 15 and is still going to see his dad every other weekend. Since moving almost 3 hours away, I can still feel that darkness staring up at me from the basement. I remember going past the house, or even the street, and if anyone is a sensitive, I promise you if you look at that house, it's wrapped in darkness. The strange thing that, until now, I didn't really think too much about is that nothing in the last 4 years of my mum living in that home, before separating from my stepdad, nothing grew in our backyard. The grass all died. The spruce tree started to die. My mum wanted to plant a few trees in our yard, but only after a few weeks they never grew, despite being watered and taken care of. My mum got 3 or 4 fruit trees up just before she gave up. The darkness not only consumed what was once a happy, loving family, but also the muck and dirt outside the house and the house itself. My husband wants to move back to the area which is only 10 minutes from this house, and it scares the living daylights out of me to think I'm going back to live so close to a house that is so consumed with pain, sadness, and darkness. I've not lived in that area in over 6 years now, and as I mentioned, I'm almost 30. Whatever resides in that house is something I do believe was feeding due to the abuse, anger, and fear that once lived there. With that being said, this is where I start to think that people are able to create things with just their mind. What you put out in the universe is what you get back. The darkness is in fact something I have not experienced since moving out. But it now hasn't been the last of my paranormal experiences. This was only the beginning. Well, thank you so much, Anonymous, for sending in your true paranormal experience, and that literally sounds like one hell of a place to live. And listeners, don't worry, I've already replied and asked for more details about the further paranormal experiences that our anonymous submitter has apparently encountered. They, of course, mentioned there the idea that the brain can create something itself. I'm particularly not a solid believer in the whole idea of cosmic ordering or throwing things out to the universe. However, there are many, many paranormal tales in regard to things known as tulpas, and I'm sure this audience, you guys, are fully aware of what a tulpa is. For those unsure, a tulpa is a thought form which paid so much attention to becomes reality. I believe the term first came to us in the West when somebody in the 1920s went to visit Tibet and stay with a colony of monks. They witnessed a monk create a tulpa, a thought form that monk wanted to perform specific duties, i.e. help around the site, clean up things, basically perform the tasks that the monk did not want to do themselves. However, soon after being created, the tulpa stopped listening to the commands of its creator and went rogue, creating a series of apparent paranormal and poltergeist-like activity around that colony. But it should be said that the creation of a tulpa is not as simple as it sounds. The person who documented this creation stated it took months of meditation by that Tibetan monk to create this thought form into life. However, we can extrapolate that and state maybe, just as a theory, if you pay enough attention to something that you believe exists, you can bring it into being. Anyone wishing to look further into the idea should Google or YouTube the Skull experiment. This was where a group of paranormal researchers sat down and created out of thin air a full backstory of an individual. They gave him a wife, a family, an occupation, how he died, and they then tried to contact him doing a séance. As you can imagine, week after week, nothing took place. But eventually, they started to receive replies from this person that never existed. It's a fascinating thing that I think everyone should at least take a peek at. So that was the Skull experiment, spelled S-C-H-O-L-E. We're going to end today's episode with an experience from one of our younger listeners. This is from Alice. Hi, my name's Ali. I'm 15 and I know that's probably younger than your normal audience, but please hear me out. I'm new to your podcast. In fact, I'm only 20 minutes into my first episode, but I plan on binging the lot. The second you mentioned people sending in ghost experiences, I thought, well, why not tell you mine? You see, I live in an old cottage. So old that some of the ceilings and door frames you have to duck under to walk around. I can't tell you the amount of time I've hit my head. I've lived here for about 14 years, with my parents and my little brother. Let me explain a bit about the house. It used to be only 4 rooms, 2 bedrooms, a kitchen and a workshop. I sincerely mean the next part, but the workshop apparently used to be where they made coffins. If that wasn't spooky enough already, when I was younger, I got given a metal detector and in the garden, I found a metal plaque, which was apparently meant to be screwed onto the lid of a coffin. But this isn't exactly relevant to the point, so I'll go back to the story. About 3 years ago, my parents decided to build an extension to give us a dining room. And since then, the house has felt different. Maybe I just grew up or I hit my head too hard on one of the beams. But about 8 months ago, I was up late reading. My sleep schedule is awful when I'm into a good book. And for the record, this book wasn't paranormal or anything to do with ghosts, so none of this was on my mind. I was reading around midnight to 1 a.m., and because my house creaks a lot because it's so old, it's normally all creaked out by midnight and remains silent. For the record, my bedside lamp is turned on and I'm definitely not asleep and I'm still reading. And then something sits on the end of my bed. As I said, I have a little brother, and he's regularly up and about in the night, so I just think it's him. I put down my book, preparing to scold him and tell him to go back to bed, when I realise it's not my brother. It was only a few months ago, yet I still struggle to remember the details of him. He was a young boy, definitely younger than my little brother. I know he smiled at me. I don't remember him doing it, but somehow I know he did. But the more I try to look at him, the more he seemed harder to see. Then suddenly I couldn't see him at all. My brain didn't log what had happened until the next morning. But that night, I'd gotten out of bed and crept into my little brother's room just to check he was still there. And he was, asleep and snoring. I love the idea of ghosts and the supernatural. but I'd never really believed it. Until that next morning. My mum is, and I don't want to offend anyone, but this is how she refers to herself, a hippie. She loves crystals and stuff. So I told her in the morning what happened. She believed me and then told me some stuff that I told her when I was younger. Apparently, when I was younger, I'd complain about someone walking up to me and poking me hard on the nose, or blowing in my face and on my toes. I am diagnosed with autism, and I don't like fans because of the noise, and I can't stand sleeping with my window open. Also, I'd say someone stole my duvet, or my blanket off me, or I would tell her I was trying to play tug of war with someone that wasn't there. My mum, obviously open to the supernatural, suggested I might have seen the ghost of a child, and then proceeded to tell me about a child who died nearby. Sorry, that kind of blew my mind when she told me. So we live next door to a pub, and it used to be a stable before someone transformed it into the pub. But when it was a stable, apparently a young boy died there when he was trampled to death by a horse. To be honest with you, I did try to Google that information and found nothing, so I'm not sure if it happened or if it's related. Anyway, that's what happened. I might have been tired, and so tired I was imagining things. I'm not so sure. I don't want you to make an episode of this or anything like that. I'm just pleased someone's going to read it. One last thing. My mum said when I was little, I'd get feelings about places and refuse to go in them. I'm not sure if that means anything, and I definitely don't get them now. I'm also sorry for any spelling or grammar mistakes. Many thanks, Ali. Thank you so much, Ali, for sending in your experience, and it did make the show, as all experiences do. If somebody takes the time to send me their experience, it will find a home, be it on the Dark Paranormal or here on Dark Bites, because all we want to do is spread the word that these things exist. And I'd also like to say thank you, Ali, for being so mature in your writing and also apparently in your belief system. It's clear that you're questioning things, you're not just jumping to conclusions, and even in the case of your mum telling you about the boy who died by being trampled to death, you state in your email you tried to research it and couldn't find any evidence. It's really heartening, for some reason I genuinely feel this, to know that the future of paranormal enthusiasts appear to be in a good place if they're all like Ali. So thank you, Ali, for your submission, sincerely. And that brings us to an end of this episode of Dark Bites. Be sure to join me again, this time next week, for your Patreon-only podcast, Dark Bites. Until then, take care.